Welcome back. We're still in Chapter 4, and for the last 5 parts of Chapter 4, we covered the demonstration of game theory as applied to revenue assurance using a property management automation as a tenant management service case study. We're now going to move to game theory as applied to pricing and pricing models using a different service offering of the same property management case study. We will first start by covering some key fundamentals of pricing, as well as advertising as a pricing execution tool, and then get back into our case study and unpack how game theory can be applied to pricing as a strategic lever in business strategy execution. Let's get going. We start with going through a few key pricing concepts, the first of which is the concept of Veblen goods. The fundamental characteristic of Veblen goods is that demand for such goods increases as the price of such goods increases, thus defying or contradicting the law of demand and supply. Veblen goods are typically luxury goods that are perceived to be of high quality, exclusive, and demonstrate status on the part of the individual who possesses them. Purchase behaviors of such goods are typically driven by the need to be seen as of high financial means and status. Many who purchase them tend to crave the attention of others in order to demonstrate their possession of such goods with the purpose of communicating their status to whatever audience they've got their attention of at that point. Popular luxury clothing and accessory brands can be considered as Veblen goods. While the increase in price is perceived to indicate high quality, exclusivity, and status, the goods themselves are not necessarily of superior quality than lower priced goods of a similar nature. They are just perceived to be that way due to the branding of the said good. Two apartment blocks next to each other, each built by a different developer, both have standard quality features and standard quality finishes. One apartment block is advertised in property magazines with standard unit descriptions such as room dimensions and types of finishes. One is advertised in high-end interior design magazines. The developer has a dedicated channel on pay TV, and the wife of one of the property development partners has a property staging show on one of the major streaming platforms. Launch viewings are done via wine and canapé-filled soirees, where attending guests are by invitation only. You can't just show up to a viewing. You have to email in a request with your company email, and a quick LinkedIn check will determine if you are suitable enough to be invited for a viewing. Two apartment blocks, one is 40% more expensive per square meter than the other. The more expensive the units get, the more demand there is for them, such that there is a waiting list. Two apartment blocks, similar finishes, similar value, same location, same amenities, one more expensive and more in demand. That's the Veblen effect. The second concept we deal with is the snob effect. The snob effect refers to the preference of certain goods because they are perceived to be different and unique. Such goods are characterized by a gatekeeping mentality by those who have access to them, typically higher income groups. The more accessible they become to lower income groups, the less desired they are by higher income groups. Let's go back to our two apartment blocks again. So if the property developer of the perceived fancy pants building builds another building and launches it, the snob effect mentality says that it's better to buy or take up a rental in this building now because prices are likely to be much higher after a given period. And the high prices the developer is charging now make sense because other high-income individuals of stature have purchased units in this developer's buildings at a high price without any issues. So if they paid the price, then these units must be worth the price. So say another developer spots a gap in the market. They launch buildings with a similar type of design and finishes, but their approach is high accessibility and moderate margins, mainly because they believe this strategy will help them easily ride out the highs and lows of the property market as it aligns with economic trends. Their modus operandi is this: they've assessed and read the market and identified a set of persona types that, according to the data they've been able to collect, demonstrate sustained financial stability throughout economic cycles and fit the target market, psychographic-wise, for apartments in these middle class to lower affluent areas. Perhaps one of the founders of this property development company used to be a banker, hence they have a good idea in terms of these types of insights. Let's say perhaps that the main psychographic of this persona group is aspirant, but not superficial, basically looking for a sense of community that is bonded through things that are considered or perceived to matter more to these target groups, such as family, hobbies such as yoga, gardening, the love for four-legged furry companions, and so on. They then hire influencers fitting these target personas to promote these buildings on social media. And that's how they fill up or sell out their buildings, depending on the model of the building. The successful product manager who doesn't believe in driving an expensive car and still drives their old reliable car. The divorced single mom chartered accountant more occupied with rebuilding her life financially and otherwise and is focused on saving up for their kids' education rather than buying expensive clothing brands. The seasoned tech bro who owns a successful direct-to-consumer retail platform for small farmers' produce, who wears chinos and a white t-shirt every day and is diverting all his or her funds to building an autonomous farm back home in a peaceful rural village where they plan to retire. Basically, an apartment building with a parking lot full of small new cars as well as old and reliable cars, whose owners largely have healthy bank accounts and prioritize keeping it that way. So the economy takes a turn for the worst. Owners in the fancy pants apartment buildings start experiencing defaults, while some struggle to fill empty apartments. Units are coming onto the market by the dozen, making sales for new buildings difficult. Owners decide to lower sale prices and rentals in line with units in buildings by this new competitor, whose owners and tenants appear to be mostly weathering the storm just fine. The fancy apartment block then becomes more accessible. The snob crowd who are weathering the storm don't like it. The expression, "there goes the neighborhood," comes to mind, and they leave. On the other hand, the owners of units in the new competitors' buildings are doing okay. These apartment blocks are popular with perceived regular people, many of whom have healthy bank balances. Absolutely everyone is talking about these buildings. That brings us to our next concept, the bandwagon effect. The more people talk about it, the more people want it. Veblen goods can also experience the bandwagon effect, hence the trend of consumers buying counterfeits of Veblen goods because it's so popular. They want it, they just can't afford it. The bandwagon effect is demonstrated well on social media. Social media accounts with a large following tend to attract a lot of engagement from non followers. Sure, the algorithm tends to push the account more if the account has a lot of followers, real followers that is, but people are generally likely to interact with an account's posts if the account has many followers. Similarly, an account is likely to attract more engagement the more engagement it gets. That's the bandwagon effect. The more popular the account appears to be, the more users want to engage with it. You might argue that it's because the content is interesting and engaging, but that's not always the case. Let's consider other examples. The overpriced energy drink that had kids begging their parents to buy it for them at the price of a pair of quality shoes. Remember those? The key psychographics driver there was the bandwagon effect. The drink bottle that is named after that very smart but very quiet and introverted uncle, the one that everyone has in their family. You know, the one who gets bluntly honest and starts spilling everyone's secrets when drunk and won't keep quiet no matter how many people beg him to. That one. That popular expensive flask type of cup that's named after him. That everyone suddenly has to have. Yeah, that one. The purchasing behavior behind that cup, bandwagon. The last concept is Giffen goods. Giffen goods are similar to Veblen goods. The main difference is that Veblen goods are luxury goods and Giffen goods are not luxury goods. Food brands that are considered to be original because the brand has established itself to be the standard of that food item in the market and therefore is slightly more expensive than similar items of different brands is a good example. These goods are typically low income necessities, food items, detergents, things that people need. These day to day goods typically consumed by low income groups whose demand rises as the price increases. That is, when prices of given goods rise, the demand for these goods rises as well. Let's recap. Veblen goods are luxury goods whose demand rises as the price increases due to the perception of quality. These goods are considered to be items that are exclusive and project high status, and the primary consumers of such goods are high income groups. Purchasing behaviors of that expensive smartphone with the half-eaten fruit on the back. Veblen. These high-income groups lose interest in such a good once the said good becomes more accessible, mainly price-wise, to groups considered to be of a lower income and lower status, a concept that is called the snob effect. Price increases in goods underlined by the snob effect indicate future price increases and therefore drive a desire to purchase more by the primary consumers of such goods, who are typically high income groups. Bandwagon goods are goods whose purchasing behaviors are driven by popularity. Bandwagon goods do not necessarily have an obvious primary consumer. The secondary consumers of Veblen goods, typically people below the high income groups who aspirationally buy counterfeit Veblen goods because they cannot afford them, do so driven by the bandwagon effect. Less popular Veblen goods tend to not attract this secondary consumer because they do not drive the bandwagon effect. Let's take leather bags for example. Think Chanel, Gucci, Polo/Ralph Lauren, Jekyll & Hyde, and Brando. All of them are Veblen goods, but only 3 of them attract a secondary consumer driven by the bandwagon effect. See if you can identify which 2 we're talking about. Again, not a paid promo, so Gucci, Jekyll & Hyde, Polo/Ralph Lauren, and Brando, you're welcome. Lastly, Giffen goods, similar to Veblen goods, attract more demand as the price increases, but unlike Veblen goods, Giffen goods are not luxury goods. They are low-income necessities and their primary consumers are low-income groups.